Hello guys, today we will be talking about current meta matchups for Akali. I will be explaining how to play against each meta matchup for mid lane, but of course I won't be going too in depth about these matchups. But this guide will give you a general understanding on how to lane against them. First, I'll be starting off with melee matchups first, and then going into mages. Okay, Sylas. A lot of people complain about Sylas being a stack check champion, but here's this thing you can do against Sylas is where no matter what ability Sylas takes level 1, they will lose the trade if they do decide to trade with you or just fight you in general, because you do absolutely destroy them early game, level 1. It's fine if they hit 2 E's on you as well, because you just absolutely out-trade them. For example here, I just walk up to the Sylas and start fighting him, and he loses the trade just because Akali has more AD early game, because her adaptives goes into her AD and not AP. Also, another note, don't be afraid to take damage because you just heal it back up with second wind and Doran shield. Akali also has one of the highest health regens in the game. Okay, moving back to laning. Once you're level 2, the trade patterns is very simple. When Sylas E's in, you just shroud, and then you don't want to get hit by the second E, so you just try to maneuver and dodge the E while you're trading back with him. It's okay if he gets a W off because that's how the trade pattern works, but yeah. Okay, here I took a really bad trade, but it's okay because as long as you're damaging him back, you basically win the trade because you have more health regen than the enemy laner. So the more you damage them, the more like you can push them out of lane or get a free reset for yourself. Like any damage you trade for your HP bar is fine because you have second wind and D shield. After slowly consistently poking Sylas and making him waste his mana, he is almost in kill range here. And I do try to go for the kill, but then I get ganked, which is a very unlucky timing. But I still kill him anyway because he has no mana or any like other health resources to fight back. After I solo kill Sylas, I am a little bit more ahead in XP than him. So here I hit 6, but he doesn't respect my 6. So he tries to poke me, but I punish him by just killing him instead. Also, another note to make on Akali. Sometimes it's really bad to take E under turret because after you E, R'ing will put you in an awkward position. So sometimes it's better to R first and then E so you're in front of the target. Another thing about Sylas is that a good Sylas player will never E2 as long as you're in Shroud because they will be afraid of you hitting your E on them. So whenever you see a Sylas E in, he's never gonna E2 unless he sees that you already used your E or he's like in a safe distance enough to not get hit by your E. Irelia lane is more Akali favored, but you always gotta watch out for Aurelia's level 2 all-in. She's gonna just EQ with minions and she might cheese you and get a kill level 2. But there are always some ways to avoid that. You just gotta respect her. And if you hit level 2 first, you can always just use Shroud to avoid her engage and just completely negate her like level 2 all-in. When Irelia Qs onto you, make sure to auto first before you Q because you're maximizing the amount of damage you do. It's okay if it's not an empowered auto. Just a normal basic attack auto is fine. As you can see, I walk really back here to respect Aurelia's level 2. And I walk back up because I know I'm going to hit level 2 soon. And I just Shroud to negate her all-in. And I don't lose half my HP bar. You never want to fight Irelia when your abilities are down. Especially your Shroud. If your Shroud is down, fighting Irelia is very scary because your Shroud helps you like dodge her auto attacks because your invis, you can't auto invis champs, right? So it really helps in Irelia 1v1s. So you just like never want to fight her when your Shroud is down. It is very scary. Any E's you hit this lane, don't be afraid to take them if you have Shroud up. If you always have Shroud up when you take your E's, you basically win most trades because Irelia can't really trade back if you have Shroud. Just be careful about going too far out of like shroud range or like lane range, because if you do play it wrong, she can easily just kill you. Another tip about Irelia is that if she's isolated from your minion wave, that means she has no targets to dash to besides you, right? So if you're like far away from your minion wave, it's very hard for Aurelius to outplay because they have no other target to dash to besides you, and that means she has to get into melee range of you and just fight you unless she just tries to run away. Always be careful about dodging Aurelius, because if you don't dodge them, you really have to be careful about Aurelia just dashing on top of you. You can always use Shroud to try and help you dodge her E's as well, but you want to save Shroud for like fighting, trading. You don't want to use Shroud just to dodge an ability, so be careful about that. Cat lane is literally just a handshake lane. If both players are good, then no one should ever be dead in this lane, unless like jungle interference or bot lane interference, you know. Besides that, there's something like this lane should this lane is not interactive at all. Of course, Akali has the better 1v1 in cat lane and beats Katarina every time. Early games, you should really be looking for getting early game pressure, like push her, shove her in, get prio, so you can help jungle participate first, you know, be there first, be the first one there for jungle fights and such not. You just want to be careful because cat players don't actually play for their lane, they only play for roaming. So like the more roams that cat players succeed, like the more ahead they get, even if they're behind in XP and minions, because cat's playstyle is just, you know, roam, get free kills, and then come back to lane, and then one shot your laner somehow, you know, all that. There's really nothing, like, there's not much I can explain in this matchup besides, like, don't position yourself to a point where cat can hit you with her Q and get minions at the same time, and don't stand on top of daggers, as she will just E to her dagger, deal damage to you, and then try to sidestep your E with her W movement speed, or just walk away because there's nothing you can do because she just dashes back to her back wave and she's free. The only thing I noticed is that Akalis usually take E level 2, and they take that to try and solo kill Katarina, but it is very risky because sometimes when you miss your E, you just end up dying because Katarina can just all in you because most of your abilities are down. You usually might end up actually killing her if she messes up her auto trades as well. Katarina, not Akali. And yeah. The only thing I recommend doing in this matchup is taking Shroud level 2 instead of E, so that your trade pattern is way better and you can guarantee more damage rather than missing E and then getting like most of your HP bar chunked from, you know, taking a risky ability or a risky trade. Fish. This matchup is purely a skill matchup, but it's a little more Akali favored early game levels 1 to 2, just because like he doesn't have that much damage level 1, and you can just up poke him with Q. Just be careful trading with him once you guys reach level 3, because Fizz players just QW and then they try to E out, and you end up not like being able to trade with him at all, and it's very unfortunate. Also, keep in mind that the shield is very important in this matchup, just because like you need to sustain against Fizz because he is like very pokish, and it really helps. Of course, you can take like D-Ring or Dark Seal if you feel like egoing, but sometimes it's not worth it because you do get out poked sometimes and out sustained. Sometimes when trading with Fizz, keep in mind that your E counters his E. So every time he tries to E in as like for poke or something, you can always E out of it with your E. Another thing is that you can time your E to hit his E as he's like coming out of it. So like if you time it right, you can avoid the damage and hit him at the same time. You can also do it with his Q. If you see him like walking up to you, obviously like he's gonna try and Q. You can E is Q, and then it like you dodge the Q damage and you get a free E hit. The only thing to keep in mind in this matchup is that Fizz R reveals you in Shroud as well, so it's very important to dodge Fizz R if you can with your E or your flash. It doesn't matter because Fizz R can actually, if you get hit by like a max range Fizz R, it actually does end up killing you. because Fizz is very strong once he hits level 6 and has like one or two components of an item. Jayce is definitely one of like the more harder matchups for Akali, just because like he's a lane bully. He has more poke. He can bully you from taking CS. He can just out damage you pre-6. The only thing to note is that when playing against Jayce, I recommend taking D shield and second wind just to like sustain from his poke, like try to sustain his poke. The only thing you can do early is if he does go for an early trade like melee form hammer, you can trade back because he doesn't have he doesn't have E yet, so it's pretty easy trade. And let's say like Jayce is like half HP level 1, you can definitely go for it's like he's in lethal range. So if you want to try and take level E or like take E level 2, you definitely can to try to kill him. But other than that, Jayce is pretty hard to kill overall because they do end up buying Hex Shrinker later, and Hex Shrinker is a very like counter Akali item. It's very hard. Like Hex Shrinker is just like cucks Akali very hard, and it's very annoying because Jayce is like one of the users who can use Hex Shrinker very well as well. Other than that, you want to make sure whenever Jayce like tries to EQ you want to be behind your minions so that it prevents you from getting hit. Another thing is that it's pretty hard to farm in this lane, so I would recommend like not trying to trade HP for farm because he can punish you very hardly. Usually whenever he's in ranged form, you want to try to short trade with him as much as possible, just because like he doesn't have like in hammer form he gets more armor and MR, but in ranged form he loses that armor and MR, and it's like harder for him to poke you back because like he just switched to ranged form, so he can't switch back to hammer form right away, and it lets you do short trades, but just don't commit too hard because he will punish you by the time his hammer form comes back up, he will punish you. So you just want to short trade and then get out, right? Another tip for Jayce lane is that you can use your E to dodge his Q in hammer form. It just lets you like dodge his hammer form Q, and it's like free easy trade because it hits him as you're dodging, so you just get free damage, right? Other than that, I think mostly this lane is just existing and trying not to get killed by Jayce. Usually you just want to like roam from this lane. You don't really want to fight him like anytime because it's pretty hard to engage on Jayce unless you hit all your abilities. If you hit all your abilities, he dies for sure. Like, yeah, but other than this, like other than whatever, you just want to roam and exist in this lane. You don't want to ever fight him. Usually how I play this matchup is that I let the Qiyana push me in, usually like level 1. I just purposely stand back and just let them push the wave, because if I act afraid, that means the Qiyana is more willing to walk up for the minions, and it just lets me bait them in so that I can take a good trade with them later on. But usually you can push them in level 1 because you win the level 1 trades usually. Yeah. In the pre-level 6 lane, it's mostly Akali favored for this matchup. Usually you don't really get to fight her unless she like tries to fight you, because like she just takes W bush and just perma invis, runs away. She'll never fight you because Qiyana is mostly a scaling champ, so therefore they usually don't fight you, but you can trade with them if they do want to trade back, and you usually win most trades as well, because Qiyana is not that strong level 1, or like early game, not level 1, but it's like she's not strong early game. So if she does decide to trade with you, you can punish her very hardly, and you win most trades as well. The only thing to note is that your E does give true vision of Qiyana when she's in W, like her Q push W shot or whatever it is, and that usually lets you like get free trades off. Just remember, whenever you cast E, the true sight does go away, right? Like when you dash to her, the true sight goes away. So just be mindful of that. Ekko matchup is probably one of the most like Akali favorite lanes out there, and one of the best matchups you can ever get, like hope to get. Because no matter how bad you play in this matchup, it's always Akali favored. Like it's you're always gonna win every trade, like no matter what, right? When fighting against Ekko, you always want to permafight him because Ekko's goal is just to farm and scale until like mid late game. That's where Ekko shines the best because his champ does a lot of damage later in the game. But Ekko doesn't really know damage early game, so you can just fight him as much as you want. And no matter how many times like you take bad trades, you always win if you take D shield and second wind because most of the times he will never have like enough damage to one shot you unless he's like super fed. Like for example, this clip shows how bad I played this matchup, but it doesn't matter, right? Because I will always win because Akali versus Ekko is just always Akali favored. It does not matter. Another thing you can do versus Ekko is that when you see him E and he's about to like E onto you, you can use your E at the same time so that it hits him right as he like dashes on top of you and you get like free trade damage off. Since Ekko relies on his 3 passive stacks to do damage, you can always use your Shroud to dodge the 3rd passive attack. When he EQs in, you can just Shroud immediately to block the passive, and yeah, good trade. Yone matchup is also Akali favored, right? If he walks up for minions level 1, you can always punish him with Q, auto Q. If he doesn't walk into range for your auto, just Q him again and walk away. For this lane in particular, you can take D-Ring or D-Shield if you want to be safe, but you can be very aggressive here because Yone is a very, like, it's very Akali favored for this matchup. You can pretty much just poke him until level 3 is when he can poke you back. Just be careful about his level 1 all-in trade. Just don't get too close to him because he will just run you down with Qs and auto attacks because of lethal tempo. Usually what you're looking for in this lane is just to outpoke the Yone and force him to recall. Because, you know, the more you stay in lane, the higher chances you can get a roam off. And Yone is one of those champs that needs a lot of resources to do stuff, right? So if you make him lose as many resources as he can, you basically just win the lane off of that. If he does decide to fight you pre-6, right, you will win most trades because you either can E his Q, like his second Q, his tornado Q, and it dodges the knockup and you get a free E off at the same time. Or you can use your Shroud to just completely like space him to death because what Yone needs is auto attacks and Qs to kill you, but your Shroud basically just negates that entirely. Another thing you can do is that you can use your W move speed to dodge his Q, like his tornado Q, if you don't want to use your E to like dodge it instead. So you can use the movement speed from your Shroud to just dodge his tornado Q, and yeah. Make sure that whenever you're going in for like a poke or trade with Yone, make sure that his second Q isn't up, his tornado Q, so that you're guaranteed free damage, because there's no way for him to poke you back unless he just randomly hits you in Shroud with a Q or a W. Like but he's gonna just W the Shroud anyways, so it's fine. But if he just randomly hits you with a Q in Shroud, then he's just better, right? When going for all-ins, you want to make sure you hit your E1 on him so that if he either goes back to his placed E, you can take your E2 back to him, or you can kill him fast enough to where he can't like escape with his E and just R away, which is kind of cringe, right? Another thing is that you can block Yone ulti, so keep that in mind. For Zed lanes, I recommend taking D shield and second wind because Zed poke is very annoying and it lets you sustain like some of that poke with D shield and second wind. Be mindful of whenever you're receiving poke from Zed, make sure that you're always behind your minions because his Q does less damage the first time it passes through a unit. So if it hits a minion first, it'll hit, like, after it hits you, it'll do less damage to you. So early level 1s, level 2s, level 3s, you can trade with Zed because he wants to walk up for minions. So whenever you see him like walk up to Q a minion or auto attack it, you can usually Q him and then go for another auto Q, and that's your trade pattern for that basically. And so you want to punish Zed for like farming as much as you can, because Zed is a scaling champ, right? He will outscale you later because all he does is just farm in lane, and yeah. But just be careful, because if Zed does poke you down enough, he will try to kill you. Like around like 50 to 40% HP is like lethal range for Zed if he hits all of his abilities on you with WQE and Ignite, then you're just dead, right? Another thing to keep in mind is that when Zed's shadow is down, do not be afraid of him. Like, you're allowed to walk up within like the 20 like seconds of like his W being down. So when his W is down, that's the time you have to either poke him or just shove the wave, because he cannot do anything else when his shadow is down. You can also look for all-ins when his W is down, because if all he has is ulti, then he will only have one shadow to fight you the whole fight, right? So when looking for all-ins, you want to make sure his W is down. And yeah. Okay, Yasuo lane. It's a lot much harder than Yone's, because Yasuo has an ability that Yone doesn't have, which is called Wind Wall. So like it blocks half of Akali's kit, and it's mostly a Yasuo favored lane until level 6, in which where you can threaten to solo kill him. Again, during level 1, do not make the mistake of walking too far up or like giving him too much space, because again, he will just run you down with autos and Qs like he just did to me. So this lane is mostly just about surviving until you're level 6 to finally like threaten to solo kill him, because you really can't threaten to solo kill Yasuo unless his wind wall is down and his flow shield's down, because flow shield is like 102 damage block, and it's pretty annoying early game because you don't have that much like energy early game, so it kind of sucks. There's two things to keep in mind in this lane. One is his wind wall, and two is like if you see him dashing to a minion, like if he walks up to a minion and like wants to dash through it, you can like predict it and E his dash and easily get an E, because they won't expect you to E the minion that they're Eing to. So that's like another thing you can do. Also, the wind wall. If you waste wind wall, then you can easily go for trades with like Q Shroud. But it's pretty hard to trade with Yasuo if his wind wall is always up, right? Just make sure when you're going for trades, make sure his wind wall is down first. Usually after level 6, it's very Akali favored, because usually what happens is that Yasuo will try to fight you, and after like watching him waste his wind wall, you can literally just kill him after, because you can just spam your Q, just auto Q, right? Sometimes you don't even have to land your E to kill him, but if it looks like you don't have enough damage, then you might have to go for the E. Like I should have killed him there without E, but his team came, so it was just unfortunate. So sometimes you actually just don't need your E. You can just auto Q, and then just save your R2 for the final kill, right? Talon matchup is kind of similar to Cat's matchup in a way, because if both players are good, then no one really dies in this lane, except for like when either Akali or Talon gets a roam off and gets a double kill, then either the Talon with the double kill or the Akali with the double kill wins the lane after that. But it's really just whoever roams better wins the lane mostly, because Akali versus Talon is a very boring matchup, because you really like Akali usually wins this matchup if like the lane progresses and no one roams. But let's say that Talon just gets like too many roams off, then Talon wins. But it's mostly just whoever roams better wins the lane. Usually the way you want to play against Talon is that when going for trades, you always want to make sure that you don't get hit by 2 Ws or have like 3 stacks of passive bleed. So the way Talon will play is that he'll W you and then try to Q you, like pull his W by Qing you into you so that he gets 3 stacks of his passive, and that way he gets a free like bleed off. You can usually prevent this by pressing W or E, whichever one thinks will work best for you. But sometimes if you press E too late, he does get the passive stack off, so it kind of sucks, right? There's not much really to explain in this lane besides the fact that you can't really like, if both players are really good, right? You can't really threat to kill him, nor can he threat to kill you, because you both have abilities that just cancels each other out. Like he can just jump over walls when you engage on him, and you can press Shroud if he tries to engage on you, right? In a way, like the champs are just like you just handshake each other in lane, so there's like not really like much I can explain in this matchup. If a Talon does try to fight you, make sure that you do not let him get free passive stacks on you. Make sure that your Shroud is always up if you're going for a trade. If you're going for a trade, just always make sure your Shroud's up or your E's up, right? Because Talon wins most fights because of his bleed, of his passive. So you want to like make sure that he doesn't proc his passive as much as possible. Another tip when versing Talon is that your E reveals him when he's in his ult, right? So make sure when you're all-inning him, you want to save your, like, if you land an E, you want to save the dash until, like, the very last second to where the dash guarantees you a kill, right? Because you don't want to use your dash right away, because after you use your dash on Talon, if he's an ult, then you lose the true sight of your E, and therefore Talon has, like, the window to escape. Twisted Fate is one of those matchups where you can either take D-Ring or Dark Seal, or D-Shield if you just want to default and just AFK lane, right? But this is a matchup where you should win 100% of the time. The only thing TF has to counter you is his ultimate, where he reveals you in Shroud. The only thing you want to be careful about is his gold card, because his gold card is what stops you from like trading back with him. As like when you're engaging as Akali, you want to make sure that you either try to like stall getting hit by the gold card as much as possible, or you do like the damage as you're getting stunned, right? So either you go for the trade as he's like pulling out the card, like he's choosing what card to like pick out, or like you E in as like the gold card's hitting you, right? So that way you're on top of him as like the gold card hits you, so that way like the stun is shorter than it should be. After level 3, it's where the fun begins in this matchup. So like after like getting poked by him pre-3, you can now start trading back with him, being more aggressive, because you now have E and Shroud. So you can just start being more aggressive. You can use your Shroud to catch up to him, Q him, slow him to land your E. And if you do land your E, that's like half of his HP at least, like a chunk of his HP at least. Or you get a free flash out of landing your E, right? Because TF is very squishy early game, so you do a lot of damage early game to him, and it's pretty easy to force his flash or just get a free solo kill early game. The only thing to keep in mind is that when engaging on TF, make sure that his team's not around before you ult onto him, because if his team's around and you ult onto him and you Shroud, then he can just R you and then stun you, and his team will just collapse on you, which is like what usually happens to Akali players, because they usually engage first and then they don't know that the enemy team's around them, and TF just ends up pressing R, and then Akali is like just revealed in Shroud, and then she just dies because she has like no way out. She might have to burn flash or something, but like you usually end up dying to greedy engages. Okay, Cass matchup is kind of tricky. Okay, so two things to keep in mind when playing against Cass, right? It's her poison and her W. Her Q is like the main thing that lets her all in you level 2. You just want to be careful about getting hit level 2. If you do get hit, you want to back away as fast as you can because she will just run you down with ease. And when engaging as Akali, make sure whenever you land an E on Cassieopia, make sure that your W is always up because you always want to E2 and then W right away because she will always put her W on top of herself so that as you're dashing, you will land in her W. So therefore, you can't move after, like, you can't press R afterwards, or you can't, like, protobelt or flash, like, out of it. So you want to be mindful of always having your shot up whenever you hit an E on her. Sometimes when you do land an E on Cass, they don't expect you to take it. So, like, without your shot up. So what you can usually do is when you land E1, you take the E2, and once you, like, dash to them, you sidestep, like, you back away as fast as you can, right? Like, you just walk back as fast as you can. So therefore, you don't stand in the W for as long as you should be. Mostly what I'm talking about is, like, be mindful of your spacing versus Cassieopia. Because her W, most Cassiopeias would just panic throw W on top of them, which makes it, like, very small, right? So, like, if you just E2 and then quickly, like, back up, then you'll just, like, mostly walk out of it. Like, most of the times you'll walk out of it. Usually when you want to all-in Cassieopia, it's more about not doing, like, damage. It's more about playing mind games, right? Because you want her to blow her ulti and her W as fast as you can. Like, when she doesn't have her ulti or her W up, then she's pretty much dead, right? Like, you want to, like, mindfuck her as much as you can. And the more you mindfuck Cassieopia, like, the more, like, expected they are to hit, like, to press their R button. Just make sure, if you do, unfortunately, you can't mind game her, just make sure that you're always fighting her in Shroud, because if she does land an ulti on you and you're in Shroud, then she can't really do damage to you besides, like, pressing Q on you, but her Q doesn't do that much damage because Cassiopeia's never max Q first. So just, like, you have a lot of scapegoats in this matchup. For Lissandra matchups, I recommend taking D-Shield in second wind because you need to sustain her poke. I don't think Fleet is necessary here because she doesn't do, like, that much poke damage, and you don't need Fleet that badly against her. The only thing to be wary of in this matchup is that if you stand behind your minions, her Q range, after she hits a minion with her Q range, like, increases by, like, a little. So just be mindful of, like, standing behind your minions because it doesn't help you dodge her skill shots, right? It doesn't help you dodge your skill shots at all. So, like, you want to, like, position yourself away from the minions so that she can either decide to either poke you with her Q or poke them, like, get the minions with her Q, right? So you make her choose one, and either if she chooses, like, to poke you, then she uses minions, or if she chooses the minions, then you don't take poke damage, right? So it's a win-win for you. Lissandra is one of those annoying mages that you can't really kill because when you try to engage on her, she will just W and then E away, which is kind of lame, right? So what mostly you try to do this lane is that you just farm and scale. You can either take TP or you can try to take Ignite to, like, try to cheese solo kill her, but it's usually not worth it because a good Lissandra player would never get solo killed by Akali because Lissandra, like, her E is, like, almost half of the lane, so she will just E away, like, anytime you try. So it is possible to solo kill Lissandra if she's, like, pushed up way too far. Like, if she's, like, near, like, your turret, like, range, you can probably just all in her and just try to kill her. Like, just make sure that you do land your E on her, because as she's Eing away, you can also E2 to follow her, because she might just R you and then E away. But note that you can also cast E while you're stunned. So usually for Lissandra is that pre-6, you can usually go for small trades, pokes, and maybe, like, look for an all-in if she does get too low. But sometimes, like, Lissandra also takes TP, so once she gets lost chap, like, once she gets her first back and, like, gets, like, either a mana crystal or, like, just, like, any type of mana, then I think, like, that's when the lane is, like, completely just over, because you don't really have much kill potential on her anymore because she just shoves lave and just roams, right? So if you do somehow land an E on her, just always take it. Always take E's versus Lissandra, unless like it's like late game and she has ulti up. Just never take it when they have ulti up. Okay, like always take it before they have ulti up because it's always worth the damage. Yeah, but this lane is very just uninteractive at the most because it's a control mage. She just AFK lanes, shoves wave. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do about it unless like there's like jungle interference or support interference. But mostly you just farm and just pray that she messes up or like enemy jungler messes up, right? So there's not much you can really do. Okay, Ori is a very annoying matchup because her poke is kind of insane versus Akali, but second wind in D shield does help with that poke. It helps you sustain in lane very much. There's not much you can do level 1 besides just Q the first 3 minions. You just wait for the first 3 minions to like get low and then you either Q or just try to auto them. There is a thing you can do against mages where you take E level 1 so that you can punish them for walking up too far. But sometimes you do get punished for it by losing like the first 6 minions because you don't have Q to farm. Ori lane is kind of like unfun until level 3 is when you can really start being interactive with her because you don't really have much like space to do anything because you don't have Shroud or E level 2. Like whichever one you pick, you don't have the other one. So it's very uninteractive unless you land an E on her level 2 and then somehow you end up solo killing her, which you can do because you do kind of have enough damage if you do land an E level 2, but in which case you usually don't. But usually in Ori lanes, you will be shoved in like most of the times. So it's like free ganks for your jungler if you do want jungle interference. But to win this lane, it's much like you want to make Orianna waste like as much mana as she can so that she's forced to recall, or just if she positions badly to try to do more poke to you, then she just gets hit by an E and then she gets heavily punished, right? Any mage player that gets hit by an Akali E gets heavily punished by Akali, right? Also note that Orianna doesn't have that much damage early game, right? So if she does decide to try and fight you in your minion wave, you might actually end up just destroying her completely because she doesn't have that much damage to like burst you from like either 400 to 500 HP, right? But if she does look for like a greedy poke, you do heavily punish her. Like just go punish her. Don't be afraid because you do have D shield in second wind. So just don't be afraid of taking damage ever versus mages, unless it's like lethal damage. The only thing to keep in mind is that Ori E does give her self armor and MR, and whenever all inning in Orianna, if you see that her ball isn't on her, it's pretty much like a free all in because you can just R and then she will try to E R herself and then you can just E out of it to like avoid getting hit by the R, and then she just immediately dies after that because you just play it like slow and then she just dies, right? Or you can play it fast. It doesn't matter how much, like, it doesn't matter how you play it. She will always end up dying if she misses her R. Like, if Ori misses her R, then she's just dead. Just focus on dodging the Ori R, and then she's mostly dead because most of the times you always want to dash behind the Orianna as much as possible to zone her from her turret. Azir is one of those stinky control mages, and it's very annoying to play against Azir. Like, very, very annoying. I actually recommend taking D-Shield and Fleet versus this matchup, but I don't know if like other Azir players are like good at spacing or not, but like if they're not, if you struggle against Azir players, then Fleet and D-Shield and second wind is usually the way to go. But let's say you don't, then I would just go like Electrocute with D-Shield or Conquer with D-Shield. It doesn't matter, whichever. But you still need D-Shield for the sustain in this lane because Azir does have really good poke versus Akali. You can go for level 1 poke in this lane if you want to. You can Q auto Q because all Azir has is his soldiers, but a good Azir will always space you very hard. So sometimes it's very difficult to actually get Qs off of it, like Q onto him. But usually you can abuse Azir pretty early in the game if you just use your Shroud as like, because Azir's poke is like mostly auto based, so your Shroud does help against Azir. So you usually want, like, whenever you go for trades, you usually want to play around your Shroud as much as you can to avoid like getting like poked as much. Your job in this lane is to make Azir waste all of his mana and force a recall, right? Because after Azir wastes all of his mana, then he has no more, like, he can't really poke you anymore, and he's forced to recall, right? And that means you have like two options in this, like, after recalls. You can either shove the wave or recall, or you can try to match his recall by also recalling, right? Azir players usually play very aggressive early game, so just watch out for, like, just watch out, because you don't want to get poked too hard, right? Just be careful about the poke, because sometimes you don't expect poke to like be lethal to you. Usually after level 6, you can run him down, but you will get R'd away immediately. Sometimes you can actually time your E with his R to instantly get like your E1 off and follow him. But sometimes it's very risky to dive Azir or like be like near his turret, like half of the lane, because as you engage on Azir and your E1 hits, he will just E back to his turret. So it's very hard to engage on Azir unless they're like a very bad Azir player, right? Or like his ultimate, like if his ultimate is down, then it's a free kill. Like if you just stand behind Azir after ulting in, if he doesn't have ult, then he will try to dash away. But if you stand behind him, you will always block his E. Like you always want to try to block his dash. So then he has no escape tool and is forced to either flash or like try to do as much damage to you as possible. Azir is very vulnerable when his ulti is down. So just make sure you always abuse an Azir whenever his ulti is down, because he doesn't have like the ability to stop you from all-inning him. Because his dash is easily blocked by Akali, because Akali's like always on top of him. So just make sure that whenever you're engaging on an Azir, make sure his ulti is down, and it's usually a free kill because you can just always run them down for free. Lux is a pretty annoying poke champ, but usually we run them down later at level 6 after they waste an ability. Like after they waste their snare ability or like stun ability for like any control mage, then the champ is basically just useless. Like they're a mobile mage. So you can usually run them down after they waste their one ability that helps them like escape from you. The main thing to keep in mind when playing against Lux is that she does have a lot of poke, so I do recommend D-Shield and second wind in this matchup, but it's just like preference, whatever you want, like if you want Conquer or Electrocute, it doesn't matter. Both are fine in this lane. There's not much you can do versus Lux pre-6, because a good Lux will always just stand behind her minions and make it so you can't land an E on her. But if you do somehow land an E on her, then you will always, like, Lux will always be punished for getting hit by an Akali E. So if you do somehow land an E on Lux, then it's pretty much free damage for you, because Lux doesn't have that much damage early game to kill you anyways. It's just poke damage, so don't be afraid to take the E. Lux matchup is usually kind of uninteractive until level 6, because there's not much you can really do versus her poke unless you just randomly land an E on her. But besides that, like, just try to sustain, make her waste her mana, like, try not to take too much damage, and like try like not to die to her poke. Like, you want to survive as much as you can, soak XP, like just soak XP, like just regen your health from your like Akali health regen, like just like survive as like long as you can, to the point where you can run her down level 6. Usually you can go for pre-6 trades if you want to, but it's usually not worth, because Lux, there's always a chance that Lux will always land a Q on you, and then you're just stuck there and like there's nothing you can do, and she just walks away from you and you lose half your HP to her Q and E, and it kind of sucks. But again, after a mage uses their 1cc ability, it's always like the time to go in. Like you can always all in them, and it's free. It's always free. unless they like flash away, and then you get a free flash. Okay, Xerath lane is very similar to Lux, like very, very similar, except Xerath has a little more range than Lux, so it's like the same concept. It's just be more wary of the poke range and just try to out-sustain him, try to make him waste all of his mana and force him to recall so that you can run him down at level 6. Xerath has the same concept as Lux, right? To where if he uses his one stun ability, then you can just run him down after level 6, right? But usually it's very hard to kill these long range mages pre-6 because they know how to use their range to their advantage. But usually once they use their stun ability and you're level 6, you can usually run them down after you're level 6. If you struggle with Xerath, I recommend taking D-Shield and Second Wind. But if you struggle a lot, then Fleet, like you can take Fleet in this matchup for sure. But only take it if you struggle versus these matchups. Because Second Wind in D-Shield is enough, but if you struggle like to dodge skill shots, then you should take Fleet. But yeah, Xerath is just basically like Lux, just survive poke and just AFK lane. Out sustain his mana, like just survive until level 6 so you can run him down. Usually if they do decide to just like try to auto you, right, as like you're trying to trade with them and they just randomly completely stand still for no reason, then it's pretty much a free kill, right? Just play it normally and you just win the fight every time. Okay, Neeko is one of the most annoying poke champs at the moment. Like her Q range is unbelievably insane versus like melee matchups, and like the damage is actually so insane too. But you usually take D-Shield and Second Wind here. Again, D-Shield and Second Wind versus most mages because their poke is just insane. 2 things to know about Neeko, right? Her E ability, you want to stand away from your minions as much as possible because if her E hits a minion first and then hits you, the E route is extended for like another second or 2. I don't know how. I actually don't know how much it is, but it's actually extended for a very long time. So if she hits you with like a full stun, then her key, like you get hit by like a full like 3 Qs. So it's very bad for you. That's like half your HP. Neeko matchup is kind of the same concept as Ori, Lux, and Xerath in a way, because she does have, like, she's kind of immobile, but at the same time, she's very oppressive like Orianna. So after level 6, you do usually run her down after she uses her E, which is her root, and after you dodge her E, you have to dodge her ulti as well. So it kind of sucks that like the champ has 2 stuns, but if you just dodge one of those abilities, you usually do end up winning the fight. Again, usually when fighting these mages, you just want to try to survive as much as you can, and you know, like survive their poke. You know, just like try not to die, so that you usually end up solo killing them later. Yeah, most mage matchups you're just playing for level 6. You're not playing for anything else. You're just playing for level 6. Again, if you see a mage out of position and like way too far up your turret, you can always punish them very hardly. Just make sure that you don't commit too hard because you might get punished by jungler or by the fact that they are just like, they're really fast and you just run on turret or like have a dash. Just be careful. But again, just dodge. Like with these mages, just dodge their stun ability and you just win every fight. Viktor poke is also very oppressive. It's just similar. It's similar to Orianna, to where like he can do a lot of damage to you pretty much very early, and you can take Fleet into this matchup if you want to, because you have enough damage in your full kit to kill him at level 6 anyways. But if you struggle with this matchup, again, do take Fleet and Second Wind and D-Shield. It does help a lot versus these mages. There's really no like hard mechanical like explanation in this matchup, except like when all-inning him, just be careful of his W placement, because that's the only thing that can actually fuck you up. But just like, it's very just similar to like any other mage. You just survive until level 6 and then you run him down again. Like it's just the same with any other mage. Like, the only way you do end up killing these mages is if you land a random E on them in lane. But half of the times, like 80% of the times, that never happens and you just end up running them down level 6. The only thing that Viktor doesn't have that all the other mages have is a stun ability, like a point, like a skill shot or a point and click stun, right? Because Viktor doesn't have any CC like that, like is instant, so it's pretty easy to run Viktor down after level 6. So don't be afraid of Viktor because he doesn't have a stun. All he has is damage. You just have to be careful of his poke damage pre-6. Again, like just survive whatever, right? You can go for pokes like Q, Shroud. You can use your Q and Shroud to poke him, but it's usually just better to wait till 6. Just survive lane, right? Because usually what happens is the enemy mage will have to walk up to you, and he wants like to stop you from like either holding the wave or freezing the wave, and usually they end up walking way too far up, and that means that they're in kill range, like they're too like far away from the turret, so you can usually just go for an all-in. Okay, Swain matchup is pretty simple. You're either afraid of his poke and you go D-shield second wind, or you ego it and go D-ring and just try to kill him pre-6, right? But the thing about Swain is that he gains more health like the longer the game goes on because of his ability, his passive. When going for trades with Swain, you always want to make sure that you dodge his E. That is the most important thing, that you dodge his E, because if you do get hit by his E, he will just combo you into like he'll just combo into a WQ, and then you like might lose like 20-30% of your HP, which kind of sucks. So just be mindful of his E whenever you're trying to poke or trade with him. If you struggle versus Swain, I do recommend buying Oblivion Orb, but do not finish the item. Never build Morello second or third item. It is never worth it. It's always a bait, right? You can always finish Morello 4th or 5th item, but never finish Morello second or third item. It's always a bait. The only thing to keep in mind about Swain is that the longer the fight goes on, the more likely Swain is gonna win, because the longer like Swain excels in extended fights, right? Because of his ulti, the more like the longer his ult stays on, the longer like the more like healing he gets, and you know he just gets a lot of value off of his ulti, and like how long the fight prolongs, you know. So that's why you like whenever you engage on Swain, you want to kill him as fast as you can. Just never be afraid of like trying to all in him and then like being afraid of not having enough damage, right? Because sometimes you will have enough damage, but like sometimes you're just too afraid to like, you know, go in, right? The trade patterns is very simple with Swain, because it's just you poke him with Q and Shroud, and that's it, like, right? You just poke him until he's low enough to where if you land an E on him, he dies. But yeah, you just poke him in this lane. There's not really much you can really do, because it's very hard to all in Swain because of his E. Because if you do E him, and then he like times your E with his E, he will just get a free proc off his E. But there is a thing where if you do hit him with your E, you can always sidestep with your Shroud. Like you E2 and then Shroud immediately after you go to him, and then you Shroud for movement speed, and you walk to the side so you don't get hit by his E. But I've rarely like had trouble like with that, because Swain E is pretty easy to dodge. Again, if you think about it this way, Swain is very similar to like a control mage, to where if they waste their 1 CC ability, then they're just dead, right? Because if you waste E, you can get free poke off and potentially a free kill, right? But again, it's just like the longer the fight goes on, the harder Swain wins. So just be mindful of that. Okay, for Vlad matchups, it's usually whoever sustains the longest wins this matchup. Um, Usually Vladimir, like, it's pretty hard to out sustain Vladimir because he can just always just Q the wave and get free healing. But you want to pressure, like, you want to poke and trade with Vladimir as much as you can, because the way Akali sustain works is that if she takes damage, she gains more health from D shield and second wind. And usually what Vladimir players do is that when you land an E on Vladimir, they'll usually W your E, but sometimes if the Vladimir is full HP and they use W, that means they lose more HP than they actually take from your level 1 E. So sometimes it's actually worth for you to bait out the Vladimir W. Okay, but in all reality, this lane is just whoever can poke more and heal more is the winner, because whoever stays in lane the longest usually wins the battle, right? Whoever's forced to back first usually loses more resources, and it kind of sucks. The way you win versus Vladimir is that every time Vladimir W's down, that's when your window is open for trades and poke, right? Every time Vladimir uses a W on your E, that's when you get free poke. Also, don't be afraid when Vladimir has full blood bar. You can use your shroud to like hide until his blood bar is gone, right? Like his full rage blood bar, so that you can just sit in shroud and just wait out the timer, and you can poke him after his bar runs out. That's usually how I play against Vladimir, is that I walk up to him and then I press W when he's about to like get his blood bar full, and then he can't proc it on me. If you struggle in Vladimir matchups, I recommend buying Oblivion Orb on your first back. If you do, like, if you're afraid of his healing, then Oblivion Orb is the way to go. But remember, do not buy Morello, like second or third item. It is never worth. But again, once you see Vladimir uses W to poke or avoid your damage, that is your window to either look for an all-in or look for some poke damage or just trade with him in general, okay? Like, every time Vladimir W is down, that is your window. But again, every time you land on your E on Vladimir, expect him to always W it. If he doesn't, then that means you get free damage and you basically win the trade, because he will end up Wing sometime if he doesn't end up Wing your E, right? Just keep in mind that taking short trades with Vladimir is pretty bad, because he can always heal up the damage that he takes from a short trade, right? Let's say a short trade is like 100 to 2 damage HP. Vladimir can easily heal that up with like 2-3 Qs. So just keep in mind that short trades is pretty bad against Vladimir, and always try to take long trades if you can, because it takes a very long time for Vladimir to out heal your damage early game. Another thing to keep in mind about Vladimir is that Vladimir has really long CDs early game, and it's pretty hard for him to heal up a lot during the early games, because his Q cooldown isn't short until he gets items, right? So the longer the trades take, the better. Tristana lane is just literally, I'm sorry for existing lane, right? Because Tristana is just the most annoying mid lane champ ever to like have like ever become meta. So the way you play against Tristana is that you sack level 1 wave. That means you give your first 6 minions until you have Shroud. You cannot walk up until you have Shroud, because a good Tristana player will start W and then W on top of you and just auto you to death, right? And as a Akali, you usually don't win the trade ever, because it's pretty hard, because Tristanas usually just outspace you. If she doesn't take W level 1, then she'll usually take E level 1 and then just press E on you and walk at you. She'll either just walk at you and then like auto E and then just keep autoing you, or just promo zone you for minions while spacing your Qs. The only way you get to play this lane is if you have Shroud up, because once Tristana doesn't have E anymore, so for example, if Tristana W's in and she E's on top of, like, if she follows up with E, that means you can just instantly use Shroud and wait for the E to pop, and then you can start trading with Tristana, right? Because that is the only way you win the trade, or like to trade back, because with no E damage, that means her damage is lowered by like a significant amount. just always make sure whenever you're trading with Tristana, make sure that her E is always like, make sure like she can't ever pop her E on you, right? Because her E does so much damage when it's fully stacked. And it's very important that you don't let her stack her E on you at all. Because usually early levels, Tristana's main damage is her E. So just be careful about her E button. That's all this lane is about. It's just like avoiding getting stacked by her E and avoiding getting permazoned by just her auto attacks. Just like try not to get autoed as much as you can, right? It's just like playing into mage, but instead it's auto attacks instead of spells. Again, just respect Tristana because Tristana is very oppressive with her all-ins. Just always respect her when you don't have your shroud up, because if no shroud means you get just all in with W and E. But after you're level 6, you can usually just all in her if she wastes her W. Because if she wastes her W, for some reason, you can just press R on her, and then she'll either try to R you away, which by then your R puts you behind her, so she just R's you behind her, and that means she has no room for escape, and you just end up killing her. Okay, so Aesol is one of the most boring champs to play against ever, because all he does is just sit there and hold Q and farms the wave, right? There's a few things you can do to stop him from just EQing the wave. So you can pretty much just poke him level 1, because most Aesol players take E level 1 to farm for stackies. But if there are some players that take Q level 1 to punish Akali for trying to go for pokes. So if they do take Q level 1, just back off right away, because you do lose the level 1 trade if he does take Q, because his little flame crit thing is kind of a lot of damage. So just be careful about that. Mostly this lane is pretty simple. It's just try to poke him as much as you can. Don't let him stack his Stardust off of the minions that easily. Always punish him when he goes for minions. And if it looks like he's trying to target you with his Q, just press E on him as he's standing still, because it's always an easy hit for you. And recast your E once his Q, once he uses all of his flamethrower breath, so that he has to wait a couple of seconds before recasting his Q button. Usually Aesol players will W away as you're casting E. So if they do that, just walk away. It's not worth chasing the Aesol, because his Q is going to always be up as he's flying away. And he's just going to keep breathing at you. The only way you kill him is if you have ulti. But usually in the early levels, this scenario happens a lot where Akali players will always chase the Aesol, the level 3 Aesol who has W up, and lose half of their HP because he's just flying away, and his W makes it so his Q does more damage. So just always be wary of chasing it flying Aesol. Usually pretty much you can zone Aesol from his minion wave if he plays the matchup bad at level 1. If he starts E at level 1, then you can just zone him perma. But if he starts Q at level 1, just be afraid. Just respect his level 1. Don't be afraid. I mean, just respect his level 1. That's all. Usually at level 6, you can all in him. Just press R on him, and then make sure you E land, so that if he does try to fly away, you can just follow him with E, and then just one-shot him after he finishes flying away. There's not really much to explain about Aesol. It's a pretty simple matchup. It's just pretty boring, though, because if Aesol plays smart, then he never dies in this lane, because he's just always near his tower. So he just AFKs and farms for Stardust. Okay, Vex is one of the hardest counters to Akali. She's just pretty annoying to play against, and it's pretty she has a lot of damage to Akali. If you struggle with this matchup, you can take Fleet, Second Wind, and D-Shield. But usually going for level 1 trades is very risky. It's high risk, high reward. So if you dodge her E at level 1, because usually Vex take E level 1, if you dodge her E level 1, you get a very good trade-off. But if you get hit by the E level 1, it's pretty bad for you. Again, this matchup is just like any other control mage matchup, where you just survive the lane until level 6, and where you can all in her at level 6 and wait for her to waste her fear, and which then is just free kill after that. Yeah, but mostly this lane is just mostly surviving Like, do your best to survive. Take TP if you have to, because you don't. Sometimes you don't need Ignite to kill someone at level 6, but it's just handy. So usually the way you want to trade with Vex is that whenever you see her fear bar is like down, that's when you want to go for trades, right? You never want to go for trades when she has her fear up. So whenever she has her fear down, that's when you go for the trades. It doesn't matter if she has all of her abilities up. It's just you want to trade with her when her fear is down, because that is the best time to go in. Another thing to note about Vex is that her R does reveal you in Shroud, so be mindful of that when like engaging on like enemies, that if you get hit by Vex R, it does reveal you in Shroud, so just be careful about that. Wait for Vex to waste all of her abilities, like for example, just wait for her to waste her fear, like here, and then just all in her, and then it's just a free kill after Vex wastes her E. Or, I mean not her E, her fear, and it's just simple from that. Ahri versus Akali is kind of like a very skilled matchup, but it's a little more favored towards Ahri because Ahri is ranged, like she has more range than you, so therefore it's a little more Ahri favored. But we do have better like trade patterns versus Ahri, and it's pretty easy to trade with Ahri. Just be careful about Ahri's charm, because Ahri's charm can fuck Akali up many ways, like canceling Akali's E, for instance, or canceling your R, or canceling like your all-ins, whatever. Usually you want to survive until levels like 4, 5, or 6, and that's when you can actually start playing the lane, because mostly in this matchup you usually get abused until level 4, 5, 6, and you can usually trade back, but it's pretty hard to, because if Ahri has good spacing, it's really not worth trying to go for poke and trade. Doran Shield and Second Wind is very recommended in this matchup because Ahri poke is obnoxious. Ahri's job in this lane is to force you to miss as many minions as you can, or try to cheese you into an early game solo kill where she pokes you to like 20% HP, and then she tries to go for an all-in by hitting her charm, and then just one-shotting you from there. Usually just play the lane to survive and play for CS and sustain health, Don't go for the greedy trades and pokes, because you don't want to lose a lot of HP in this matchup. Usually when Ahri wastes charm, that is your time to actually go in for trades and poke. Because sometimes a bad Ahri player will just randomly throw out random charms and hope that they hit for some reason. But a good Ahri player will always hold charms, so it makes it really hard to to trade with Ahri. Just keep in mind that when Ahri charm is down, that is your window. That is the time you want to go in to trade or poke or do whatever you want, After you guys hit level 6, you and Ahri, it's very dependent on how you play the 1v1, because Ahri has 3 dashes and it's pretty hard to catch Ahri if you don't play correctly. So there's 2 things to keep in mind when all-inning Ahri at level 6. You want to make sure that her charm is down for one, and you want to make sure that the lane is long enough to where she can't just dash once and she's already under tower, right? So when engaging on Ahri, make sure that she's not near her tower and she's pushed up towards the lane, she's almost near your tower, for instance. So then that is your chance to all in her. But the only times you get to all in Ahri is if her charm is down, right? Because Ahri charm cancels Akali dash pretty easily and Akali R. Okay, Syndra lane is very similar to Xerath and Lux, right? Because Syndra has the same ability as Xerath and Lux, just a little bit less range. But the way you play against Syndra is the same as Xerath and Lux. You just want to survive her poke as much as you can, and then during level 6 you look for an all-in after she wastes her immobilizing spell, which in this case is Syndra's E. But the way it works is that Syndra has to put a ball in front of her before she E's, so it's pretty easy to dodge her E if you play it correctly. You can either flash her E, or you can just engage on her before she presses E altogether, and that way her E won't stop you from killing her. Just be careful of Syndra poke early, because it's really oppressive. It's more aggressive than Lux and Xerath, but it's still the same concept. If you do struggle in this matchup, again, do please take Doran Shield and Second Wind, because it is very important. But if you struggle a lot, even harder, then take Fleet. Fleet will help you a lot in this matchup. But D shield and second wind is a need against poke mages a lot because it helps you sustain these lanes. The next couple of matchups, I asked my friends. Akshan passive also helps with trading versus like any champ, not just with Akali. But if you do decide to trade with Akshan, be mindful of his passive shield, level 1 or level 2, because his passive shield helps him take less damage from you. The only thing to be mindful about this lane is that level 1, you do kind of have to sack some minions. Like, you can go for like the first 3 minions, but if you do, make sure to dodge the Q when he walks up to auto Q you, because if you don't dodge the Q, you lose half of your HP, and it's very bad to lose half of your HP just for 3 minions. Usually what you want to do if you're afraid of Akshan is that you just soak the XP, you sit back, soak the XP, and once you're level 2, that is when you can actually start farming for me, like start farming and trying to trade back and poke him. I actually recommend taking D shield and second wind in this matchup, but if you struggle a lot with Akshan matchup, I recommend taking fleet, but that's just preference. Sometimes Akshan might randomly decide to E in, and you can use your Shroud to stop his E in, right? Just stop his Shroud, like just use Shroud right away, stop his E, and then you can trade back with him. There's not much really to do in this lane besides survive and, soak up XP and minions. The only hard part about this lane is to survive, right? Because Akshan poke is really insane, and it's very hard to survive his poke because he just has so much damage early game. Level 6 is usually when you can all in Akshan, because you are behind him and then you make sure that you cancel his E. If he decides to E the other way, that means he's not Eing towards his turret. So you can chase him, but just like don't commit too hard if the enemy jungler is nearby. If the enemy jungler isn't nearby, then you can commit as hard as you want because you have enough damage to kill Akshan no matter what happens, because once you are behind him, you don't want to use Shroud right away, right? Because Akshan will always panic and press E before, trying to poke, like trade back. Also, another tip when facing against Akshan, his R does reveal you in Shroud, so be mindful of when engaging as Akali. Be mindful if there's like enemy team nearby, because Akshan will press R on you if his team is nearby to reveal you in Shroud, and that is what gets most Akali players, is that Akshan's R reveals her in Shroud, because not many players know that about Akshan, but yeah, just keep in mind that it does reveal you in Shroud. Okay, so Anivia lanes, I recommend actually taking Conquer in this lane, because I think you need Conquer to actually solo kill her and be a threat to her, because if you bring Electrocute in this lane and you proc her passive, that means that you have no way of actually killing her passive early game, like levels 3, 4, like you have absolutely no energy at all after you proc her egg and you just have to back off, right? But if you take Conquer, at least you can do like at least 50 or 70% of her HP when she's in egg form with just auto attacks. Okay, Anivia lane is very simple. You can usually just trade with her as much as you want, poke her as much as you want, because Anivia range isn't that big. The only thing to be wary of is her Q, right? Only Anivia Q is the only thing that can stop you from, trading and poking with her. But overall, Anivia's range is pretty short besides her Q. There are 2 things you can do if Anivia Q looks like it's going to hit you, right? One, you can press Shroud and completely make it so she can't hit you with her E. Or the second one is just you can completely just face tank her QE combo if you're not afraid of taking damage, right? But overall, the trade patterns are very simple in this lane. You just Q auto Q whenever she's in range, right? Because Anivia early game doesn't have that much damage unless you let her poke you a lot. Just be mindful of most mages because they will try to poke you with auto attacks a lot and try to outspace you. But overall, if it seems like you can't kill her pre-6, right, you can always kill her after 6, right? So if Anivia pushes up lane, right, like if she shoves the lane and then she randomly just starts walking up to you, you can just all in her right there and then, because Anivia has no dashes. She's an immobile champ. So if it looks like she's overextending way too far, then you can just all in her, right? Because if she tries to wall you off, you can either just E over it or you can flash over it and then save your E for when she flashes and then R flash with to follow her. If you struggle with this matchup, especially with Anivia, you can take second wind and D shield. But just don't be afraid of Anivia, because Anivia really doesn't have that much damage early game, and she's very immobile, right? This champ really doesn't have that much counterplay towards your champ, and it's just very unplayable for her after level 6. Taliyah is a very simple matchup, but if you struggle with this lane, D-Shield and second win is the way to go. But overall, this lane is pretty simple because it's just like any other mage matchup, right? Taliyah will always just try to poke you with her Qs, but the thing you can do about Taliyah Qs is that you can stand behind minions, but don't stand too close to the minions because her Q does do AoE damage. Another thing is, don't be afraid to dash through her E, because her E doesn't do that much damage early game. Taliyah level 1 E does not do that much damage, it's only there to stun you. The lane is very simple, right? All you want to do is just poke her when she tries to poke you, right? Because Taliyah doesn't have that much poke. Actually, like, her Q and her E are her only poke damage, but if she doesn't hit you with her W, then her E is essentially useless. Just keep in mind, minions are your best friend in this lane because you don't want to stand too close to the minions, nor do you want to stand too far. Overall, this lane shouldn't give you that much trouble because Taliyah doesn't have that much damage early game. Just be mindful of her auto attacks. Again, just be mindful of most mages auto attacks because they will just try to space auto attack you to death. Usually we all in Taliyah at level 6, and it's pretty easy kill because Taliyah doesn't have that much damage at level 6 either. There are two things you can do when engaging on Taliyah, right? One, you can bait out her E, but the second one is that if it looks like she's not going to E on you, then you can just ult on top of her and just play out slowly because you can wait out her E if you're behind her because she wants to kite away from you, right? If she doesn't kite away from you, you can just auto Q her to death. But if she does try to kite the opposite way from you, then just play it slow because she's walking towards your base, right? And not walking towards her tower. So she has like no way out unless she walks towards a wall and flashes over it. But yeah, don't be afraid of Taliyah at level 6 because Taliyah does not really have that much damage and cannot really pressure you into a kill. The only thing to be mindful in this lane is just the poke. Just be careful of her poke and then survive until level 6 and then which you can all in her to be safe. Okay, Zoe is one of those champs that has annoying poke as well. But usually level 6 you can all in Zoe again. Same with any other mage. Just be careful about her Zoe W because Zoe might get like a random good item or a good summoner spell from minions and just outplay you with that. And sometimes it's just very unlucky that she gets good items or summoner spells. The only thing to be mindful in this lane is that you want to dodge her E's as much as you can. Her E is the only thing that stops you from engaging on her. This matchup is similar to Ahri kind of because Ahri E is the same concept as Zoe E because Zoe E sleeps you, but it doesn't cancel your dash, right? You want to play around your minions in this matchup, but the same as Taliyah, you don't want to play too close to them because Zoe Q has AoE damage. So stay close to your minions, but don't stay too close to your minions because you also want to stay behind minions to dodge Zoe E. Usually this is just another poke lane where you want to survive because you can't really look for an all-in on Zoe because if you do land an E on Zoe, she's gonna save her E when she sees that you dash in. And in all reality, if you do E in on her, you lose the trade because she's just gonna E you and then walk away and then Q you so that she's far away from you and there's no way for you to get closer to her. Again, second win in D-Shield is the way to go if you struggle with these matchups. When looking for all-ins on Zoe, absolutely make sure that you do not get hit by her bubble because that will stop your all-in. Her sleep lasts for a very long time, and once you press her R button and she hits you with the sleep, she will just walk away from you. She has so much time to just walk away and sit under turret. Also, another tip is I usually don't use Ignite until the last minute where she might get out of range of me because Zoe can just pick up your Ignite and have some type of outplay potential with your Ignite. So I don't usually like igniting at the start of the fight. I usually like igniting Zoe at the end of the fight. Usually your job in this lane is just to survive until level 6 and you look for an all-in on Zoe. But if you do end up somehow dying in this lane, then I think Zoe just ends up snowballing from the entire lane and just ends up doing way too much poke damage to you. And there's actually nothing you can do about it. So just be careful and be mindful of Zoe poke. Galio is kind of an annoying matchup for Akali, but again, Galio is a melee champ, so it's pretty easy to play against Galio. Spacing in this matchup is very important because Galio passive does like a lot, like it has a lot of range around it. Usually levels 1 through 3, you can easily trade with Galio pretty easily. Just be mindful, just like make sure that you're spacing him correctly because it is important to space Galio in this matchup. When looking for trades with Galio, make sure that you don't overcommit because Galio would just hold his W onto you and then taunt, E, and then Q, and then run away from you. So you want to short trade with Galio as much as you can and just don't overcommit. Yeah, but usually the way you play this lane is that you just Q him. Yeah, you just poke him with as many Qs as you can land on him, and then just once he's like low enough, you can either pressure him for a kill or just totally like zone him off the wave, right? But usually at levels 1 to 3, you can just trade with him as much as you want because he doesn't have that much damage early game either. And Akali, it's like more like favored towards you because you're good into melee champs. Just make sure when you land your E1, do not E2 ever unless Galio E is down because you do not want to put yourself in a position to where you can easily cancel your E2 and get free damage off of you. Onto you, I mean. When all-inning Galio, make sure that you play it as slow as you can because you want to bait out Galio W and his E because Galio W does give him damage reduction, which kind of fucks up your E damage. And Galio E can fuck up your E too. So you want to be mindful of those two abilities when all-inning Galio. Whenever engaging on Galio, you can never kill him at full HP. So make sure that he's like at least a little bit low because Galio always has like the correct tools to run away from you at full HP. Another tip when versus in Galio is that you can actually E his E if you time it correctly. So if you see him like charging up his E and he's gonna like dash towards you, you can E to prevent him from hitting his E onto you, and then you get a free E off of him, and it's an easy trade. Okay, Kassadin matchup is the most simple matchup there is. You just want to be as much as a lane bully as you can to Kassadin because you don't want to let Kassadin get resources or scale into the late game because it's very bad. Kassadin is a very good scaling late game champ, so just try to be as much as a lane bully as you can early game. And I recommend actually taking D-Shield as a starting item in this lane because you want AD adaptive runes versus a Kassadin because his passive does give him resistance to MR, to AP damage. So Akali has AD adaptive as her like starting like resource or whatever. D-Shield does definitely help in this lane because all you're doing is trading and poking with him. So of course he's going to trade back with you. And D-Shield helps you sustain and keep poking him back and forth, you know. I actually recommend taking Conquer into this matchup just because you want Conquer because Kassadin is very like, he's like a very tanky bruiser AP mage, right? And Conquer actually helps you fight him in extended fights, right? And extended long trades and fights. Usually early games, the longer the fight, it's more better for you because Kassadin doesn't really have that much like cooldowns early game. So the longer the fight goes on early game, the better it is for you. Again, all you're doing in this lane is just bullying him and keeping him away from his resources like your minions. You want him to lose as many minions as you can, or you want to get him low enough to where you can force him into an early solo kill. Okay, so usually once you guys are level 6, all you're waiting for is Kassadin to press R on the wave, right? All you're waiting for is just waiting for Kassadin to press R on the wave. So his R is now on a 4-second cooldown, and now you have a 4-second window to all in him right there and then. Again, Kassadin lane is very simple. Just bully him until, you know, you guys hit level 6, and then wait for him to waste his ultimate, and that is when you all in him. Okay, Malzahar lane is played very similar to Kassadin lane, to where since Malzahar doesn't have that much damage early game, you can literally just perma-zone him off of his wave. Like, you can literally just walk up to him and start pressing Q and auto-attacking him, right? Because Malzahar is just one of those champs that is utterly useless early game, and he needs items to scale. Whenever you see Malzahar walking up, don't be afraid to walk up and start punishing him, because all Malzahar players wants to do is just E the wave and get free minions, right? But your job is to stop them from just Eing the wave and pushing, right? You just want to hard punish the Malzahar player because they picked Malzahar, and Malzahar is not that great of a champ. all you're really looking for in this lane is just to either perma-zone him from the wave or make him lose as many resources as you can, right? Because Malzahar is a scaling champ, so you want him to lose as many minions as you can make him. And your job in this lane is to bully him as much as you can. I do recommend taking D-Shield and second wind in this matchup, just not because his poke is oppressive or anything, but because you're being the lane bully, right? So you're gonna take a lot of damage from just minions and his auto attacks, but it's fine because Malzahar E level 1 doesn't do that much damage, right? So his E is basically just gonna like do like 100 damage to you, right? But your D-Shield and second wind helps you heal that in like 20 to 30 seconds, right? So it doesn't matter if you take damage in this lane because Malzahar does not do that much damage. Usually when looking for all-ins on Malzahar, make sure that his ulti is an up, right, when you want to all-in him, because Malzahar will never walk up to you unless like his team is nearby and he wants to press R on you. Just be mindful of like whenever going for dives or engages on Malzahar, make sure that his ulti isn't up, and if his ult, like if you want to engage on him when he's alone, make sure that he is alone and that no one's near him. And if he is alone, then you can basically kill him if he just ulties you, because after his ult's done, he has nothing else to defend himself with. So he's just basically dead and is forced to either burn flash or he just dies to you. Pantheon lane is one of the hardest matchups for Akali as a melee matchup, but you usually do outscale Pantheon later, like level 6, which then you can usually all in him. When early game trading with Pantheon, it's kind of scary because Pantheon does have a lot of damage early game because his specialty is being a lane bully. So he will be bullying you a lot and he will always have prio on you. Be careful of level 1 trades because Pantheon empowered Q does a lot of damage to you, and he will always it has more range, it has a lot of range, so just be mindful of that. You can usually go for Q auto Q trades with Pantheon level 1, but just be mindful of him always having prio and him having the wave shoved. Be careful of his level up timer because it is important to know when Pantheon's hitting level 2 and when he will just WQ you and chunk half of your HP. Usually you never want to walk up to Pantheon unless you have Shroud and E up. Usually how the trade pattern works is that Pantheon will press W on you and you can counter back with either pressing W or E yourself. But if you press E, sometimes it will cancel your E dash and you will just stay in place. But if you do time it your E correctly, then the dash will just go back and he can't auto you then. But it's safer to press Shroud because he can't auto you anyway if you're in Fizz. And it allows you to trade back with him. But usually the trade pattern is simple. You just Q, auto Q, Shroud, and your Shroud. Make sure that you're shrouded when you go for these trades because Pantheon W is scary. The only thing to note about Pantheon is that Pantheon E is what stops you from solo killing all the time, right? Because Pantheon E, it blocks your E almost guaranteed every time until you're level 6. And once you're level 6, you can usually go behind him and proc your E on him and he dies, right? When all-inning Pantheon, just play it slow, right? Because you want to bait out his E. You don't want to proc all of your abilities on the side that his E will be on, so just play it slow and bait out his E, and that is the way you play against Pantheon. It's just baiting out his E. Okay, Annie is a very simple lane, right? Her ability range is the same range as yours, so every time Annie gets in range to try to use an ability on you, you can always counter back with either Q or E, and it will always land because Annie range is very similar to your range. Usually early game, Annie poke is kind of obnoxious, but not that much obnoxious because you can trade back. I do recommend taking D-Shield and second win in this matchup though, because Annie can actually be very aggressive with her poke. Annie's just like any other control mage, right? All you really have to do is just survive until level 6, and which then you can all in her when she uses her passive, which is her stun, and then she's just dead, right? It's just very simple. You just bait out her stun, and then she's just dead. The only thing you want to do is just survive in this lane, but Annie is very killable early game if she does waste her stun. Whenever you see her use her stun on a minion or anything, that means that is your window for trade or poke, which one you decide. Honestly, Annie is a pretty free matchup. Annie is very similar to Cassieopia because her range is so small, except where Annie has a point and click stun and Cassieopia doesn't, but Any is very easy to play against. Just, be mindful of her stun and just, know when to trade and when not to trade. Okay, now you guys might be wondering why I didn't add LeBlanc into this matchup list. It's because I always permaban LeBlanc, and you guys should too, because LeBlanc right now is very strong against Akali recently because of static, and LeBlanc just has so much like pressure over Akali early games. It's pretty hard to play against her, and that's why you should always like permaban LeBlanc. But I always permaban LeBlanc, but LeBlanc is a skill matchup mostly, and it's just after the new static, it just makes it so much harder to play against LeBlanc, and LeBlanc just has like so much wave clear now, and just can just easily just outpoke you, and it's just very hard lane to play against. The only times you do have kill pressure on LeBlanc is level 6, but you just have to immensely outplay her and dodge her chains at all cost. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching my matchup guide, and I hope this helps you guys with future games, and I hope you guys learn more about Akali through my videos, and yeah. If you guys have any more questions, please don't be afraid to stop on my stream and ask me questions, because I am always, willing to help anyone who wants to know more about Akali or anything about that, So thank you guys so much for watching.